हेलो एवरीवन, जय हिंद एंड वेलकम टू द प्लेटफॉर्म ऑफ श्रीराम्स IAS। आप सभी का स्वागत है श्रीराम IAS के प्लेटफॉर्म पर। इन टुडेज सेशन विल बी डिस्कसिंग अबाउट the heat kills. All right, we'll be discussing about the sanitation worker. Today's topic is the India's sanitation workers, caste and climate crisis. All right, so this was a news. Why this? I have chosen this topic because this was a news in Down to Earth recently, and this news, the headline was "Invisible Deaths: How India's Climate Crisis Abandons Its Sanitation Workers." All right. And if you'll see over here, according to the Heat Watch 2024 report titled Struck by Heat, a news analysis of heat stroke deaths in India in 2024 between March and June. You have to note over here, 733 deaths were due to heat stroke were reported across 17 states in India. All right, yet these statistics mask a deeper injustice. The deaths of sanitation workers, predominantly from Dalit communities, are rendered invisible by a state apparatus that simultaneously denies their existence and excludes them from the very climate adaptation strategy designed to save lives. So this is why this news is very important to note in today's session. All right, now when we are talking about the climate change, yes, climate change is impacting everyone. But in today's session, we'll be discussing how this is impacting the lives of the sanitation workers. And we know that predominantly these workers, they come from the Dalit communities. All right, so this is a crisis at an intersection. Climate change and as well as caste discrimination and occupational hazards converge in the India's most invisible workforce, and that is the sanitation workers that are there. All right, when we are talking about the sanitation workers, there are about 5 million workers who are facing the extreme heat, and they have been systematically excluded from the protection as well. All right, the rising temperature are leading to the rising deaths that are there for these sanitation workers. And that is why, again, this is very, very important to note down in today's session. All right. And I'll tell you why this news is also important for UPSC as well. All right. Why and how the UPSC is going to ask you the questions. All right. Now, who are the sanitation workers? When we are talking about the sanitation workers, I told you that near about 5 million workers, that is the estimated workforce of the sanitation workers that are there, and they are the high risk takers. All right, the tasks that are involved while we are talking about the sanitation workers, all right, the tasks are very highly risked because they are involved in septic tank cleaning. All right, and there are various gases which are very, very dangerous to them. All right, along with this, they are involved in sewer maintenance as well as for the waste collection. And they are the sanitation workers which are working for the cleanliness drive that we are running in the countries. All right, and they are under severe hazards because of the various toxic gases which are there in the sewer. All right, whether it is ammonia, whether it is methane. So we have very severe and hazardous gases which escapes from these sewer, and that is why it is very important to note that these sanitation workers are under tremendous hazard and they face severe hazards. All right, there is extreme heat that is again it is increasing the kind of the hazard that they are facing, and also the confined spaces. When the workers, the sanitation workers, they go down in a sewer, so that is a confined space where they do not have the ability to move upside or to move upwards, and that is why it leads to their deaths. All right, now when we are talking about the legal framework, how these manual labor or the manual scavengers, they have been protected by the legal framework in India. Now, it was in 2013 that the Manual Scavengers Prohibition Act was passed by India or the Indian Parliament. Later on in 2019, there were labor codes that were introduced. And also when we are talking about 2023, Namaste scheme was launched by India. But however, when we are talking about 2024-2025, still that protection is lacking when it comes to these different sanitation workers. Now, what are the different legal frameworks that we have just studied right now? So when we are talking about the law, we are talking about the manual scavenging law. All right, it was implemented, and when over here, you can see over here, all right, there is this report that was published kind of infographic that was published in the newspaper, and this is basically where it comes from. Jignesh Mewani, who is Vadgam MLA from the, when we are talking about, the manual scavengers. All right, over here you can see that how many deaths were reported in Gujarat. When it comes to Gujarat, in 2007-15, we have 7 deaths, then 7 deaths in 2016-17 and in 2018, but in 2019 the number of the deaths were 16. All right, so they increased tremendously. And over here, when we are talking about the manual scavengers, all the act, the legal framework had been designed, it had been passed by the parliament, but the implementation in the states, that depends upon their ratification, the ratification by the states. All right, according to this, and when we are talking about the various labor codes that were passed, all right, there were labor codes that were passed, they were for the protection of these labor which are there, but still the implementation is where we are lacking somewhere. All right, at the same time, when we are talking about the Namaste scheme that was launched, National Action for Mechanized Sanitation Ecosystem. So over here, what was promised, all right, there had to be profiling of the sewer or septic tank workers. All right, they have to be provided with the occupational safety training and the PPE kits. All right, they have to be provided with the PPE kits. All right, there had to be support for safety devices to emergency response situation units as well, health insurance coverage under Ayushman Bharat that had to be provided to these different, the sanitation workers which are involved. But however, although we have the legal framework, but the implementation is something that is a kind of problematic in different states when we talk about different states. All right. Now, when we are talking about 2024, the summer that happened, and there were lots of deaths that were there. When we are talking about the heat stroke deaths, there were in total 733 heat stroke deaths that were recorded between March to June 2024. But at the same time, if you'll see, between 2020 to 2024, we have officially reported 294 deaths of the workers who are cleaning sewers and the septic tanks. That is the sanitation workers which are there. All right, when we are talking about the sewer, now over here I told you that the space is confined, space is very much confined, and we have the temperature that exceeds 50 degrees Celsius inside the sewer. And because of the climate change, because of the increasing temperature, again the temperature will go upwards. All right, at the same time the workers are exposed for hours without any breaks. All right, along with this there is heat risk that intensify in these confined spaces, and that is why this is problematic for these sanitation workers. All right, now over here you can see that the government's Namaste scheme was launched in July 2023, but over here the PPE kits were to be distributed to the sanitation workers, but however you can see over here that out of total 84,902 sanitation workers which had been, the data or their data has been taken, or they have been recorded into the system, only 45,871 PPE kits had been distributed. So you can see that there is a mismatch over here. All right, when it comes to the distribution of the PPE kits, the very important, you can say a fundamental to their safety that had not been distributed properly. Now, when we talk about the heat and caste nexus, I told you, when we are talking about the sanitation workers, most of them predominantly they come from the Dalit communities. All right, 90% of them are from the marginalized caste. All right, most of the sanitation workers, they are from the Dalit communities. All right, 150% of these labor, the Dalit laborers, they face disproportionate heat risk and they have higher heat exposure as compared to the general public. At the same time, when we talk about the proof of identity, they lack the proof of identity. They are not into the system. They are not registered as a sanitation workers, and that is why they had been excluded from various welfare schemes which are there. 40% of them, they lack the identity proof and they are not in the system registered as the sanitation workers. All right, and when we are talking about the climate change actually does not discriminate against anyone. All right, but our social system do. All right, because we can see that most of the sanitation workers, they belong to the the Dalit communities or the marginalized communities. Now, when we are talking about the deaths, there were total official deaths when we are talking about the septic tank cleaners or the sanitation workers. So there had been total 294 official deaths between 2020 to 24. And if we are going by this official data, you can understand that there had been one death of the workers that they are dying on an average every 6 days. All right. Now, what is the hidden reality? Now, this is the data, that is the official data, but many deaths had been accounted because I told you that most of them, they are not regularized or they are not into the system registered as the sanitation workers. All right. And we have the informal workers which are excluded from the data. All right. Along with this, there is no tracking of heat-related illness, and also the families, they lack compensation because of all the loopholes that is there in the system. Now, when it comes to the death trap, all right, you can see that when we are talking about the septic tanks, when we are talking about the manual scavengers, all right, so there is extreme temperature over 50 degrees Celsius that is inside tanks and sewers. All right, along with this, there are toxic gases. The toxic gases which could be hydrogen sulfide, it could be ammonia, it could be methane, which are present in these septic tanks that leads to the death of these workers. All right. And there is no protection. 90% of the death that involved workers, they were without the PPE kits, without the proper protection gear that should be there when they are going inside these septic tanks. And that is again a very alarming thing that you must note over here. All right. Now, what are the policy blind spots when it comes to protection of these sanitation workers? All right. They ignore the caste and occupation specific vulnerabilities. All right. We have, like I told you, that most of the sanitation workers, they belong to the marginalized caste, all right, marginalized, classes or the Dalit communities. And the complete, when we are talking about the heat action plan, that completely, ignores that caste nexus, as well as the occupation specific vulnerabilities which are there. We have different heat plans that are there. I'm not doubting it, but still we need to focus upon these caste as well as occupational vulnerabilities which are there when we are formulating the heat action plans which are there. All right, then when we are talking about the occupational safety code, that does not cover the sanitation workers adequately. The different codes that we have, the sanitation or occupational safety codes, that does not cover, it does not cover the sanitation workers. And when we are talking about the data collection, the data collection is not done or not properly done by tracking the caste or occupation. Again, it is very important to note over here that we have to track properly if we have to provide the last minute benefits to everyone of any policy that is there. All right. And when we are talking about the vulnerable workers, they are excluded from the planning because of all these reasons. And that is why it is very much important that all these policy loopholes should be plugged in and they should be provided with the proper benefits which are there. Now, when we talk about the Namaste scheme, it is a very prominent scheme that was launched in 2023. However, when we are talking about the Namaste scheme, all right, so there are total 84,902 of the workers, sanitation workers, which had been, they had been recognized by the Namaste scheme. Out of this, only 54% of them received the PPE kits. All right. Now, when we are talking about, there are total 46% of the workers which are still without the basic protection. All right. The mechanization process or the progress is slow. And also when we are talking about the training, the proper training where they should be able to safeguard themselves, the occupational hazards will be explained to them and they would be trained properly when they are working as a sanitation workers. So that proper training is also inadequate and the enforcement of this scheme had been weak. And that is the reason that we are discussing this in today's session. Now, when we are talking about these sanitation workers, what is shifting right now? What are the shifting risks right now? So I'll talk about the Chennai. All right. When the Chennai, the contractors, they have slashed the wages by 33%. All right. So there had been reduction in the wages of the sanitation workers. And also there are different things which have led to the more deteriorating conditions of these sanitation workers. Now, when we are talking about this, the municipal services at most of the places, they have been privatized. All right, they had been privatized, and along with this, there had been contractual labor that is now being used for the sanitation purposes. They are informal. They are not in the formal data set. All right, they are not recognized as the sanitation worker when it comes to the various schemes which have been launched, and that is why they become very vulnerable. At the same time, there is reduced wages. All right, from 22,590, the wages have reduced to about 15,000. All right, like I was telling you that they were slashed, the wages were slashed to about approximately 33% when it comes to the Chennai municipality or the Chennai contractors, and also the safety had eroded and they have lesser protection because of all these things that have changed recently. All right, now when we talk about the urban infrastructure, our urban infrastructure is in crisis. There is growth of slums, as we can see. All right, there are growth of slums because of the rural to urban migration, as well as there are, the added pressures which have been there in the various cities, whether it is Mumbai, whether it is Delhi or any other city that is growing right now. So now when we are talking about this, what is happening over there? What are the problems with the urban structure? That we have the aging septic tank system. The cities have been developed way back, and the septic tank systems or the sewer system that is there, sewerage is quite old and it is aging. All right, there is poor sewerage coverage as well, especially in those regions which are slum regions, as well as there are unauthorized colonies which are, growing up. There are unauthorized colonies which are growing up, and because these are unauthorized colonies or the slums which are popping up in the different cities, what is happening is that no proper sewerage system could be established over there, and also they have been unserved. All right, there is maintenance vacuum, and as a resultant of all these factors or the problems, now what is the result of this? That the manual entry remains necessary despite there had been ban on manual scavenging. So that is a ground reality that you can see in today's atmosphere or in today's world. Now, when we talk about the climate change is a phenomena that we are seeing right now in every sphere, whether it is oceanosphere, whether it is atmosphere, whether it is the lithosphere. The climate change is impacting everything and anything that comes to your mind. So now what is happening is that the climate change is amplifying the risk of these sanitation workers as well. We have the climate extremes which we are seeing, whether it is in the terms of the increasing temperature. All right. Along with this, there are higher worker hazards because of this extreme temperatures which are rising. Along with this, there is infrastructure damage because of the climate change or the increasing temperature. We have severe cyclonic events as well because of the increasing temperature, and again that is damaging the infrastructure that is there, and there is more manual work that had to be done. So extreme weather or the extreme changes in the weather is actually creating pressure on the infrastructure. And that pressure is leading to more manual intervention when it comes to manual scavenging, and there is greater worker or the manual scavengers exposure to the manual scavenging activities. They are going deep inside the sewers, into the septic tanks, and that is leading to their more vulnerable conditions that we are seeing today. All right. Also, this is leading to lots of health impacts to these workers. All right, when we come to the toxic gases which are released by these septic tanks, so that leads to the respiratory diseases. All right, contact with the waste and chemicals, that leads to skin conditions, and as well as repeated exposure to high temperatures, and that leads to the heat illness and also cumulative diseases which results because of the high heat exposure. So these are the different health impacts which these workers are facing right now. And I told you initially that 40% of them, they lack the ID proof, so they cannot access the welfare access. They do not have the welfare access. They do not have the access to the welfare schemes which are being run by the government. And as well as when we are talking about the life expectancy, these workers, it is estimated that their 15 to 20 years has been lost from the life expectancy that they have. Now, when we are talking about the regional crisis, you can see that this is the data related to the metro deaths that have happened so far. Over here, you can see that Delhi leads in sanitation worker deaths despite manual scavenging ban. Practice persists in unauthorized colonies as well as informal settlements. Along with Delhi, you can see Mumbai is at the second. Then we have Chennai, Bangalore and Kolkata as well. So you can see how this is impacting the lives of the manual scavengers or the sanitation workers when it comes to the metropolitan cities as well. All right. When it comes to these deaths, they are actually not an accident. All right. Actually, we can term it as a structural violence. When the same communities die doing the same work. All right. Generation after generation, we must call it what it is: systemic oppression masked as the occupational hazard. All right, the intersection of caste discrimination that we have seen, that most of these manual scavengers, they come from the Dalit communities, the contract labor exploitation as well as the climate vulnerabilities. So there is an intersection of these three that is leading to conditions, or it is creating conditions where death is predictable, it is preventable, but it is yet existent, and we have to look for these different communities. We have to look for the reasons or how we can manage these different things using the policy intervention, because you will be the administrator, you are the future administrators, so you have to think on these lines, and even UPSC will ask you the questions to think on the same lines. All right, now when we are talking about the geographer's lens, all right, through the geographer's lens, the mapping is, we have vulnerability when it comes to the urban settings. We have urban poor settlements which are there, especially when it comes to slums. All right. Again, when we are talking about the low-lying regions or zones, there we have more of vulnerability. Then there are heat islands which are being, which are there. And the heat islands are basically the urban regions, and that is leading to more temperature in these different cities. All right, the concrete, because we are using concrete for the buildings, and the concrete absorbs more of heat. And because of this, what happens is that there is more temperature that exists in the region where we have the cities, where we have the urban regions, and that is why they are dubbed as, or they are known as, the heat islands. And again, there is more temperature. The more temperature will lead to more vulnerability when it comes to these communities or into the sanitation work. All right, so that creates a vulnerability when we are talking about over here. So when we are talking about the risk, high risk of these things or these people, all right, so we can see that in the regions, especially in the urban regions, not in rural regions, in urban regions where we have the vulnerability more for these sanitation workers. All right, these workers, they live in this urban atmosphere. All right, they also work in these atmosphere, in the urban atmosphere, and also there is the climate that is hitting harder right now, because the amount of the heat, if the temperature will increase, the global temperature will increase, the urban heat islands, they will absorb more of temperature, and that will lead to more vulnerability to these section, to this class. All right, now what could be or what must be the changes that we are looking for? That is the policy changes that we have to look for. All right, now when it comes to the data, we have disaggregated data. All right, but now we have to aggregate the data sets that are there. We have to track deaths and illness, that is by caste and occupation, so that we can have a clear picture, a clear idea of the problem. All right, there have to be end of the contractualization, and thereby we have to make the employment of these sanitation workers formal. by being formal workers, they will have access to the benefits, the various benefits which are run down by the government. Along with this, what we have to do is, we have to eliminate manual entry completely. We have to accelerate mechanization. We have different, machineries now which we can, we can produce, and we have to eliminate completely a manual ban. Manual entry should be completely banned when it comes to the sanitation workers. Manual scavenging should end completely. All right. Also, we have to protect occupation-specific vulnerabilities. So we have to have inclusive heat plans where we develop heat plans according to the occupational vulnerabilities as well. We have to see that the modern sewerage is established for all the settlements, all right, where we have the aging sewerage system, sanitation system, they should be replaced by the modern sewerage system. And also, when it comes to the where these different acts or the laws or the policies which have been framed by the government, they are not met by the authorities, so there a severe penalty should be ensured. Also, the support to the families should be ensured, and in this way, we could look for the justice as well as compensation for these different deaths which have been accrued because of the manual scavenging. Now, I told you that when it comes to UPSC actually is looking for such kind of issues, all right, and it will lead to, when it comes to deliberations, when it comes to your thinking, that has to match with the UPSC when you are preparing for the UPSC Civil Services. So over here, you can link how that this news is connected to the different GS papers that you will be studying. All right, so in GS1, we have social issues. Caste dynamics, that is included in GS1. So again, this links to your GS1. It links to your GS2, where we are talking about governance, welfare schemes and rights of the oppressed classes. So again, you can find question over there in GS2 as well. In GS3, climate change, employment and urbanization, how it is impacting the sanitation workers. Again, GS3 is involved, and in ethics, human dignity, social justice. So this news covers all the different exams, papers that you will be going for and you will be preparing for in the UPSC Civil Services. All right. Now, over here, you can start writing your question on this question that we have. Examine how climate change disproportionately affects marginalized occupational groups in India. Suggest policy intervention. And this is the same type of the question that you will find in UPSC Journal Studies. All right. So you can see that why this news is very important, why you have to read it, why you have to go through it, and you do not have to read the complete news. Now you have the complete gist. What is the news all about? Also, what are the policy intervention, why it is important, the various datas, all is included in the video for you so that you can prepare well and also excel in your examination. All right, so that would be all. But before going, what could be the transformation? All right, what could be the transformation? The transformation is where we have to recognize, we have to protect and transform. All right, the climate change amplifies everything. It amplifies the existing social inequalities. So we have to recognize that climate change is a major factor where this is being done. All right, along with this, when we talk about the protection, vulnerable workers, they need immediate safeguard. All right, and also we have to transform where the policies have to be transformed, where it should address root causes and not just the symptoms. All right, we have to strike to the root causes. All right, now these are the questions for your reflection. How can we make invisible workers visible in climate policy? All right, or what does climate justice mean without caste justice? All right, or who bears the true cost of urban development? Now these questions you have to ponder upon, you have to think about, and then only you could be a good administrator and you can clear your UPSC. And not just the written examination, you can excel in your interview as well. All right, so that would be all. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care and join. But before going, do not forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care and Jai Hind.